joining us right now, the great Joe Digenova, legal analyst and former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, great to have you back.
Good morning.
All right, sir. Roger Stone arrested in a pre-dawn raid by the FBI last week, hit with 7 counts in this indictment. It looks like all these are process charges. What do you make of it?
First of all, an embarrassing exercise of federal law enforcement authority with the 6 a.m. raid on his house with 27 agents, 17 cars, flak vest, automatic weapons. This was an act of vindictive prosecution. The raid itself was an act of vindictive prosecution. The FBI should be embarrassed to be used this way by Mueller and his thugs. What's happening now is so abusive that I can't imagine that Bill Barr, when he becomes Attorney General, isn't going to have a meeting with Mr. Mueller and say, Bob, I don't want to see that ever again in a white-collar criminal case. And let's all remember this. This raid occurred after the Manafort raid. We all remember that disgusting abuse of federal law enforcement power. Just remember this. That means that after that raid of Manafort, neither Chris Wray, Rod Rosenstein, or Matt Whitaker said anything to Bob Mueller about not doing that again. So that means that those 3 men, Wray, Rosenstein, and Whitaker, approved of the raid on Roger Stone's house. This is an embarrassment to federal law enforcement. None of those people, Mueller or the other 3 persons I just mentioned, realizes what is happening to federal law enforcement. And so the answer to this was a pretext case against Roger Stone. It's flimsy. It's awful. There's no mention of collusion. It's more of the same. It's a process crime. And this was, we're going to get you. This was an attempt to embarrass Roger Stone. This case is totally unnecessary. It didn't prove anything. It's another example of why when you put somebody like Mueller in charge who hires all those Democrats to go after one man, the President of the United States, to find something where nothing exists, you get an abuse of power. And this is what has happened to the FBI.
Well,
Chris Wray should be ashamed of himself.
Playing into the theory that this is just a theatrical display of force is the fact that CNN has cameras running live there during the raid.
That's part of the vindictiveness. The FBI office in Fort Lauderdale notified CNN, or Mueller's people did. There's no way that CNN knows about this unless somebody from Mueller's office or the FBI tells them. That's part of the vindictiveness, having the cameras film it, embarrass the subject. This is disgusting. I am so embarrassed to be a former federal law enforcement official by what's happening. And by the way, this is shared widely among former U.S. attorneys and FBI officials, unless they're Democratic nuts that you see on television, for like Preet Bharara, that idiot from New York.
So moving to the government shutdown, what we're looking at right now is at the end of 3 weeks, provided the Democrats don't negotiate on the wall, which it doesn't seem likely that they will, President Trump either shuts the government down again or he declares a national emergency. Let's say he goes that second route. What is his legal authority to do something like that?
Well, Congress was gracious enough in 1976 to pass the National Emergencies Act. And they delegated their power under the Constitution to the President of the United States, and here's the best part, with no standards for declaring the emergency, which means that if he does declare an emergency, he is very likely to succeed. Now, he won't succeed at the initial level in Hawaii or San Francisco where the lawsuits against it will be filed. I mean, in the abysmal and abominable Ninth Circuit, but he will win in the Supreme Court. You will recall that I predicted when these lawsuits were filed against the Muslim travel issue with the many countries that were involved that the president would win in the Supreme Court. And in fact, he did, 9-0, because the presidential power in this area is unassailable. Under the National Emergencies Act, by the way, we have 31 national emergencies that are still pending for many, many years. Right. Congress has never ended one of them, and I would say that that's a pretty good indicator that Congress believes that if a president declares something emergency, it usually is. I think the president wins if he declares an emergency, but it'll have to be litigated because that's where we are in our modern society.
And that litigation will result in somewhat of a delay. What is that, sometime in the middle of next year when we see a brick of new wall construction based on that?
I have no idea. Who knows? I mean, the Democrats have decided that it's full-out opposition. They want to impeach the president. They want to embarrass his family. They want to destroy him. When you have that type of motivation from people like Nancy Pelosi, perhaps the single most arrogant public official in the United States today, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get messed up government. Thank you, American people, for divided government. You've done a lovely job.
Yeah. Man. All right. Well, Roger, I just want to ask you ahead of this because Roger Stone, we do have coming up here at 7:35, Joe, and we're going to ask him a couple of questions. One that I want to ask of you first is, having gotten a chance to look at the indictment and the counts in there, I wonder why a guy like Roger Stone would bother in any capacity telling an untruth of any kind if at the end of it there is no conspiracy whatsoever. Or as you read it, are these charges just overhyped and basically cases of, hey, somebody doesn't remember a detail and now all of a sudden he's got a charge against him for lying?
This is not a real law enforcement indictment. This is a signal to Stone, all of his friends, Trump, all of his family. This is a fake indictment. I mean, this is nonsense. There was no reason to bring this indictment. They brought this to be vindictive against Roger Stone, to be nasty about him because he's a public figure and he's very flamboyant about his political beliefs and his beliefs about this and everything else. This was done to embarrass him. And, of course, they chose the District of Columbia, where you will have a prejudiced jury against Republicans, just like you did in the Scooter Libby case, where the jurors came out after the case and say, we don't care about Libby. Where was Dick Cheney? That was a fair jury, wasn't it? Can you believe this? That's exactly what Roger Stone's going to get. And Mueller knew it. This is a vindictive prosecution. It serves no law enforcement purpose. It's disgraceful. And all the people in the Justice Department who are part of it, all those wonderful career people, the non-whistleblowers throughout the Hillary investigation, Chris Wray, Mr. Pretty Boy, Empty Suit, FBI Director, Rod Rosenstein, the Rasputin of this story, and poor Matt Whitaker sitting there like the second bump on a log after Jeff Sessions, saying and doing absolutely nothing to stop this disgraceful episode.
Yeah, that's right. And after all these legal actions we've seen, we have not yet seen a single case of conspiracy with the Russian government in any capacity.
Perfect case for it. Because they allege, by the way, everything that Roger Stone is accused of doing other than the lying is perfectly legal. Communicating with Julian Assange, communicating with WikiLeaks, talking to the left-wing radio guy, trying to get copies of the emails. All of that is legal, political, First Amendment protected behavior. What you got from Mueller was more garbage, more law enforcement garbage.
Yeah. All right. Joe Digenova, thank you as always. Really appreciate it,
You
sir.
bet.
Let's sort of hash this out with my friend, the Wall Street Journal associate editor, crackerjack writer, John Bussey. We've also got Republican pollster Lee Carter and the After the Bell co-host, Connell McShane. Connell, where is this going?
Well, if you have to assume by the reports that we're getting, and not confirmed yet, that there will be some sort of an agreement on a short-term continuing resolution by this afternoon or over the weekend, then I think the next question is, what do the next, say, 3 weeks look like?
Right.
This has been a losing political issue for the president. If you just try to keep it simple, I know it's Lee's department to look at the data, but we had the Fox numbers the other night, and 51% were blaming him, only 34% congressional Democrats. So over the next 3 weeks, if the president agrees to this, what can he get out of the Democrats so we're not right back in this same situation less than a month from now?
How much is this polling pressure coming into play?
You know, I don't think that much. I think the president has been willing to take this on. I think when you look at approval ratings of how this is being handled, 5 and 10 approve of the Democrats, 5 disapprove of the Democrats, 6 and 10 disapprove of the Republicans and the president. That's not that different. I think people are blaming them both right now and saying this is ridiculous, get a deal done. I think you're looking at things like happening today when you're seeing airports closing and it's getting more and more personal to people. They're saying this is getting ridiculous. Come on, put yourselves, self-interest to the side. But I do think this. I think that the president is very, very focused on keeping his word on the wall. Because the one thing that the president has not lost in all of the polling numbers is they've gone up and down and vacillated, and his approval ratings gone all over the place. 9 in 10 Americans believe that he's going to do what he says he's going to do, that he believes in the policies that he's out there advocating for.
Well, the only way he gets that now is an emergency declaration, right?
That's the only way he can get it now. But if he goes right now and says, look, at least we need a down payment, he's not backing off the deal and saying, I'm not, we're going to go forward without it. So I think that we're not going to see a complete compromise there. I don't think he's going to back down entirely. entirely. I was surprised to see him backing down off the State of the Union address. That doesn't seem in character. So anything, I guess, could happen. But I think that number is very, very important to the president and his trust.
If you get a temporary deal or whatever, the State of the Union back on next week, because I think we all canceled our hotel. I don't know what I'd somebody to stay with. Yeah, really. All right.
Exactly.
What do you think?
Majority of polls say that the public is blaming the president and the Republicans on this, and there'll be kind of variations.
And certainly reflected in that GOP powwow in the Senate.
Yeah,
so going at each other.
And you're beginning to see some senators kind of voting for Democratic proposals as well. Look, Nancy Pelosi still has the president where she wants him, committed to this structure, this wall. A down payment on the wall in any agreement, that's what's being proposed. What does that mean? You could see that as an off-ramp, Neil. Maybe what they end up agreeing to is more border security funding, and that could be for drones, for people, for facilities, with no mention of a wall, and that is used by the president perhaps as a kind of a political fig leaf to sort of marshal on and bring it up again, later on. But Nancy Pelosi sees no political gain in giving him what he wants out of his campaign promises. At a certain point, the population is going to say a pox on both your houses. That's what she has to worry about.
All right. And your fine newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, is indeed reporting that the president is considering a 3-week stopgap spending bill that would start today, and it would reopen the government while negotiations over border security funding would continue, including that aforementioned wall. The White House is making tentative plans to get ready for this, and has apparently got broad backing by Republicans. That would seem to be obvious, but again, it would beg the issue, Colin. This is the original plan that the president himself nixed.
He backed himself
when Mitch McConnell was ready to go with it.
He backed himself into a corner here. I mean, if you step back and look at what we've gone through here over the last month, you're right. The president could have had this particular deal. That's why I'm saying the next 3 weeks will be interesting, because to John's point, I don't see, and from what you're saying, the Journal is reporting now, it's not in there, what the motivation would be. Just if you step back and not try to take a side on it, and you say, what would be the incentive for Democrats to give him this quote-unquote down payment on the wall that he wants so badly right now? And I just don't see one, because the public, again, is blaming the president more than they're blaming the Democrats. And if we get to that point where they're all being blamed equally, I don't know where that line is, but we're not there yet. Right now, the president's taking more of the blame. So from Nancy Pelosi's point of view, she just doesn't have the incentive to go there.